Hey everyone. I never thought I'd be the guy posting here, but life has a way of humbling you real fast. I'm a 34M, my wife is 32F, and until a few months ago I honestly believed we had one of those boring but solid marriages. We'd been together for 9 years, married for 5. No kids yet, just a small apartment, 2 cats, and the kind of routine that feels safe. Work, dinner together, dumb shows before bed. Nothing dramatic. Or at least that's what I thought. Looking back now, the cracks were their way earlier than I realized. My wife has always been intense. Sharp-tongued, quick to snap, the kind of person who could turn a normal conversation into an argument in about 10 seconds flat. Friends used to joke that she had no filter. I used to defend her, say she was just blunt and honest. The funny thing is, honesty turned out to be the one thing she really wasn't. At first the lies were small. Or at least they seemed small at the time. She'd say she stayed late at work, but then casually mention a coworker's story from a meeting that supposedly happened earlier that day. She'd say she was exhausted and going to bed early, but I'd wake up at 2 a.m. and see the bathroom light on and hear her whispering on the phone. When I asked about it, she'd snap back immediately. "Why are you interrogating me? You're being paranoid. You always do this." And somehow I'd end up apologizing. The weird part is that nothing in our life looked obviously broken from the outside. We still went out with friends, still planned trips, still talked about maybe buying a house someday. But something about her energy had shifted. She was distracted, restless, like she was halfway somewhere else all the time. Then the sudden stuff started happening. Random girls' nights on weekdays. Last-minute work trips that popped up out of nowhere. Whole evenings where she'd disappear and come back irritated if I asked even the simplest question. One night she came home at almost 1 a.m., tossed her keys on the counter, and said, completely casually, "My phone died, so don't start with the messages." The thing is, I hadn't even texted her that night. And that was the first moment something in my stomach really dropped. Like my brain finally caught up with what my gut had been trying to tell me for weeks. I didn't know it yet, but that night was the beginning of everything unraveling. After that night, I started noticing things I probably should have noticed way earlier. You know how when something finally clicks in your brain, suddenly all the weird little details start lining up? Yeah. That's exactly what happened. My wife had always been glued to her phone, but now it was different. Before, she'd scroll Instagram or text friends without caring who saw. Now the screen would flip face down the second I walked into the room. If a notification popped up, she'd grab the phone like it was about to explode. At first I told myself I was overthinking it. I didn't want to be that paranoid husband digging for problems that might not even exist. But the behavior kept getting stranger. One evening we were sitting on the couch watching some random Netflix show. Her phone buzzed. She glanced at it, and immediately stood up. "I'm gonna take a quick shower," she said. Which was weird because it was like 7:30 p.m. She disappeared into the bathroom with the phone. 10 minutes later I heard the shower running, but before that there had been a lot of quiet typing. I remember just sitting there staring at the paused TV screen, feeling this heavy knot forming in my chest. Another thing, she started getting meaner. Not just sarcastic. Mean. If I asked how her day was, she'd roll her eyes. If I suggested we grab dinner together, she'd sigh like I'd asked her to run a marathon. One night I said, "Hey, you seem stressed lately. Everything okay at work?" She laughed. Not a happy laugh. The kind that's half mocking. "Oh my God, can you stop acting like my therapist for 5 minutes?" That one actually stung. The strange part was how unpredictable everything became. Some nights she'd act almost normal, joking, talking about weekend plans, even cuddling up next to me on the couch like nothing was wrong. Then the next day she'd barely look at me. It felt like living with 2 different people. The lies kept piling up too. One Friday she told me she had a late project meeting and wouldn't be home until around 10. Around 9:15 I got a random text from a mutual friend asking if we were coming to the bar downtown. Apparently my wife had told them she was already on her way. When she got home later that night, I asked her about it. She didn't even hesitate. "Oh yeah, the meeting got cancelled last minute," she said while taking off her shoes. "I forgot to tell you." Except her story didn't match the timeline at all. That was the moment I started paying attention for real. Not obsessively. Not going through her stuff yet. But watching. Listening. And once you start doing that, it's amazing how quickly the truth starts slipping through the cracks. I still didn't have proof of anything. But my gut was screaming that something was very, very wrong. And about a week later, completely by accident, I found the first real piece of evidence. The first real clue came from something stupid. Like, ridiculously small. Laundry. It was a Sunday morning. My wife had already left the apartment saying she was going to the gym. That in itself wasn't weird, she'd been going more often lately, which I had actually thought was a good thing. I was doing laundry because our basket was overflowing. Normal boring husband stuff. When I grabbed her jeans off the chair in the bedroom, her phone slipped out of the back pocket and landed on the floor. Now, I want to be clear about something. Up until that moment, I had never gone through her phone. Not once in 9 years together. I always believed that if you get to that point, something in the relationship is already broken. So I picked it up fully intending to just put it on the nightstand. But the screen lit up. And there it was. A message preview. Just a name I didn't recognize and one line of text. "Last night was worth the wait." I swear my brain froze for a solid 5 seconds. I told myself there had to be some normal explanation. Maybe it was a joke. Maybe it was about work. Maybe I was reading into it. But then another message came in. "Still thinking about you." My hands started shaking. The phone wasn't locked yet because she must have used it recently before leaving. The conversation was right there on the screen. And this is where things get weird. Instead of opening it immediately, I just stood there staring at the phone like it was some kind of bomb that might explode if I touched it. Part of me didn't want to know. Because once you see something like that, you can't unsee it. There's no going back to. Maybe it's nothing. But curiosity, or maybe dread, won. I opened the thread. And the first thing I noticed was how long it had been going on. Not days. Weeks. Scrolling up, there were messages from late nights, inside jokes, photos I didn't even want to look at too closely. A lot of flirting. A lot of, "I wish you were here." And a few lines that made my stomach drop straight through the floor. One of them said, "I can't stay long tonight. He'll start asking questions." That was me. The weirdest part was the timing. The last night message? That had been sent around 1:30 a.m. Which meant the night she came home late saying she'd been with coworkers. She hadn't been with coworkers. She'd been with him. I remember sitting on the edge of the bed, phone in my hands, feeling like all the air had been sucked out of the room. Shock is a strange thing. I expected anger. Or panic. Instead, I just felt numb. Like my brain was slowly trying to process the fact that the person I trusted most had apparently been living a completely different life behind my back. I put the phone back exactly where I found it. Closed the bedroom door. And just sat in the living room staring at the wall for almost an hour. Because now I knew something terrible was happening. I just didn't know yet how deep it went. The next few hours after finding those messages were some of the strangest of my life. I didn't confront her right away. Honestly, I couldn't. My brain felt like it was running 10 different scenarios at once, and none of them ended well. So I did the only thing I could think of, I waited. She came back from the gym around noon. Same as always, headphones around her neck, gym bag over her shoulder, acting completely normal. She walked into the kitchen, grabbed a bottle of water, and gave me a quick, "Hey." And I remember thinking, how can someone act this normal? I kept studying her face, looking for, I don't know, guilt? Nervousness? Something. Nothing. If anything, she seemed a little irritated that I was home instead of out doing something. Did you seriously spend the whole morning here? She asked. Yeah, I said. Just doing laundry. She nodded and walked past me into the bedroom. My heart was pounding because I knew exactly what she was about to see, the phone sitting right where she left it. A minute later she came back out. Still normal. Still calm. That was the moment I realized something that made everything worse. She had absolutely no idea I'd seen those messages. For the rest of the afternoon I watched her like I was observing a stranger. She sat on the couch scrolling through her phone, occasionally smiling at something on the screen. Once or twice she typed a message and tilted the phone away from me. And every time she did that, my chest tightened. Around 3 p.m., she suddenly stood up. I'm going to grab coffee with Emma, she said, already putting on her jacket. Emma was one of her closest friends, so again, nothing unusual on the surface. But now my brain was questioning everything. How long? I asked. She shrugged. An hour maybe. Then she gave me this look, the kind she used whenever she thought I was asking too many questions. Why? Just wondering, I said. She rolled her eyes a little, grabbed her keys, and left. The second the door closed, the silence in the apartment felt heavy. I sat there for about 10 seconds. Then I stood up and walked straight into the bedroom. Her phone was on the dresser again. This time it was locked. And that's when I noticed something I hadn't paid attention to before. The notifications on the screen. Not just from that guy. There were others. Different names. Different apps. Messages popping up and disappearing quickly. My stomach twisted. Maybe it was just group chats. Maybe coworkers. Maybe I was spiraling. But something told me the situation might be worse than I'd originally thought. Much worse. So I did something I'm still not proud of. I waited for another message to come in. And when it did, I saw a name that made everything even more confusing. Because it wasn't the guy from earlier. It was someone else. When that second name popped up on her phone, my brain basically short-circuited. It wasn't the same guy from the messages I'd already seen. Completely different name. And the preview said something that made my stomach twist even tighter. Did you tell him you were at the gym today? For a second I actually thought maybe it was one of her friends joking around. Maybe they were planning some kind of surprise or something stupid like that. But then another message came in. You said he almost saw the messages last week. Be careful. Yeah. That didn't sound like a joke. I felt this weird mix of anger and disbelief rising in my chest. Up until that moment, I'd been trying to convince myself there was only one guy. One stupid mistake. One bad decision she'd made. But now it looked like there might be more going on. I didn't unlock the phone this time. I couldn't. It needed her passcode now. But those little notification previews were enough to make my mind race. And then the sudden event that really messed with my head happened. Her phone started ringing. The name on the screen? The same guy from the first messages. The one she'd apparently spent the night with. I just stared at it buzzing on the dresser. My first instinct was to answer it. Just pick it up and say, "Hey, this is the husband you've been hearing about." But I didn't. Instead, I watched it ring until it stopped. 2 seconds later, a message popped up. "Call me when you're free. I miss you." I actually laughed. Not because anything was funny, but because the situation suddenly felt so unreal. 9 years together. 5 years married. And apparently my wife had a whole other life happening right under my nose. I walked back into the living room and sat down, trying to think clearly. That's when another random thing hit me. Emma. The friend she'd supposedly gone to get coffee with. On a whim, I opened Instagram and checked Emma's story. She was at brunch. In another part of the city. With 2 other friends. My wife wasn't there. That realization landed like a punch to the gut. Which meant one thing: whatever she was doing right now, she'd lied about it again. And suddenly I had this horrible thought. What if she wasn't meeting Emma, What if she was meeting him? The same guy who had just called her phone 10 minutes ago. I remember sitting there gripping the couch cushion, feeling anger finally starting to push through the numbness. Because now it wasn't just suspicion. It wasn't just weird messages. She was actively lying to my face while continuing whatever this thing was behind my back. But the craziest twist of that day hadn't even happened yet. Because about 40 minutes later, my phone rang. And the caller was someone I absolutely did not expect. The call came from a number I didn't recognize. Normally I ignore unknown numbers, but for some reason that day I answered. Hello? There was a pause on the other end. Then a guy's voice. Is this Mark? Not my real name, obviously. Yeah. Who's this? Another pause. The kind where you can almost hear someone debating whether to hang up. My name's Daniel, he said finally. This is probably going to sound weird, but are you married to Lisa? My heart immediately started pounding. Yeah, I said slowly. Why? The guy exhaled like he'd been holding his breath for 5 minutes. Okay, look, man. I'm really sorry to call you like this. I'd been going back and forth about it all morning. Every alarm bell in my head started ringing. What's going on? I asked. Another long pause. I think our partners might be seeing each other. For a second I didn't understand what he meant. Then it clicked. You mean my wife? I asked. Yeah, he said quietly. And my girlfriend. The room suddenly felt way too small. Apparently Daniel had been dating his girlfriend for about 3 years. They lived together. Things had been normal until recently. Late nights, weird behavior, constant texting. Sound familiar? That morning he had gone through her phone after noticing the same kinds of suspicious messages I had. And guess whose name kept popping up? My wife's. According to him, they'd been meeting up. For a while now. His girlfriend had saved my wife's number under a fake name, but Daniel eventually figured out who it actually was. Then he did something I hadn't even thought of doing yet. He searched my wife's name online. Found me. Found my number. And called. So, wait, I said, trying to keep my thoughts straight. You're saying your girlfriend and my wife are, what, friends? Another awkward silence. I don't think they're just friends, Daniel said. Then he said something that made my stomach drop again. I think they've both been cheating on us. That possibility hadn't even crossed my mind yet. I'd been so focused on the messages with the guy that I assumed he was the affair. But now another scenario was forming in my head. One where things were way more complicated. Do you have proof? I asked. Yeah, Daniel said. Then he added something that made the entire situation take a sharp, unexpected turn. They're actually together right now. When Daniel said they were together right now, my brain went completely blank. What do you mean right now? I asked. I mean literally right now, he said. My girlfriend told me she was going shopping with a friend this afternoon. But her phone location is still on and, well... He hesitated. And? I pushed. And it's at a hotel. For a moment I didn't say anything. Because that was the exact same time my wife had supposedly gone to get coffee with Emma. My stomach dropped. Which hotel? I asked. Daniel told me the name. And here's the part that made the whole situation feel surreal. It was only about 15 minutes from our apartment. Not across town. Not somewhere discreet. 15 minutes. So you're saying they're together? I asked. That's what it looks like, Daniel said. I drove by once already. I saw my girlfriend's car in the parking lot. The anger that had been simmering inside me all day suddenly started boiling over. Part of me wanted to hang up, drive straight there, and kick down the door like something out of a bad movie. But another part of me was frozen. Look, Daniel continued, sounding just as shaken as I felt. I didn't call to start drama. I just thought you deserved to know. Yeah, I muttered. I appreciate it. There was a pause while both of us processed the insanity of what was happening. Then Daniel asked the question I'd been avoiding in my own head. So, what do you want to do? Good question. Because there were suddenly a lot of options. Ignore it. Confront her later. Or go see the truth with my own eyes. My hands were literally shaking at this point. I'm not going to lie, Daniel said. I'm sitting in a parking lot about 2 blocks away right now trying to decide the same thing. That image hit me hard. 2 strangers. Both realizing at the same time that the people they trusted most might be betraying them. Which room? I asked. I don't know yet, he said. But I know they checked in about 40 minutes ago. 40 minutes? Which meant while I'd been sitting in my living room trying to process everything. My wife had likely been walking into a hotel with someone else. That thought flipped a switch inside me. Stay there, I said. Daniel hesitated. You're coming? Yeah, I said, grabbing my keys. Because at that point I didn't want guesses. I didn't want theories. I wanted the truth. Even if it completely wrecked my life. The drive to the hotel felt unreal. It was one of those weird moments where everything around you looks completely normal. People walking dogs, traffic lights changing, some guy jogging down the sidewalk. But inside your head it feels like the world is collapsing. My hands were gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles were white. Part of me kept hoping Daniel had made a mistake. Maybe the location was wrong. Maybe it was a coincidence. Maybe my wife was actually with Emma, and this whole thing would turn out to be some insane misunderstanding. But deep down I already knew that wasn't going to happen. When I pulled into the hotel parking lot, Daniel texted me. I'm in a gray Honda near the back. I parked 2 rows over and sat there for a second, trying to calm my breathing. My heart was pounding like I'd just run a marathon. Then I got out of the car. Daniel looked exactly how I felt, exhausted, stressed, and slightly pale like he hadn't slept in days. We shook hands awkwardly, the kind of handshake 2 strangers share when they're suddenly connected by something terrible. You Mark? He asked. Yeah. He nodded toward the parking lot. That's her car, he said quietly. I followed his gaze. And there it was. My wife's car. Parked about 20 spaces away. The same one she'd driven when she told me she was going to get coffee. For a few seconds I just stared at it. Something about seeing physical proof made everything feel heavier. So, what now? I asked. Daniel rubbed the back of his neck. I went inside earlier to check the lobby, he said. Didn't see them. But the front desk confirmed my girlfriend checked in. My stomach twisted again. Together? I asked. No, he said. 2 separate check-ins about 5 minutes apart. Which meant they probably planned it that way. To avoid suspicion. To look less obvious. That realization made my chest burn with anger. These 2 have been doing this for a while, Daniel muttered. You don't coordinate stuff like that unless it's a routine. The thought made me feel sick. 9 years together. And apparently my wife had gotten good at lying to my face. We stood there in silence for a moment. Then suddenly Daniel froze. Wait, he said. What? He nodded toward the hotel entrance. 2 people had just walked out of the lobby doors. At first I couldn't see their faces clearly. But then the woman turned slightly toward the parking lot. And my stomach dropped. It was my wife. But the person next to her wasn't Daniel's girlfriend. It was a guy. The same guy whose name I'd seen in her messages. For a second I honestly thought my brain was playing tricks on me. Because standing there in the hotel parking lot, watching my wife walk out of the lobby, next to another guy, felt so surreal that part of me still wanted to believe I was wrong. But I wasn't. It was her. Same jacket she'd put on before leaving the apartment. Same bag slung over her shoulder. Same way she walked, quick, slightly impatient steps like she was always in a hurry. And the guy next to her? He looked way too comfortable standing that close to someone else's wife. They weren't holding hands, but they were laughing about something. Casual. Relaxed. Like 2 people who had just spent time together, and were enjoying the afterglow. I felt my chest tighten. Daniel leaned slightly forward next to me. "That's not my girlfriend," he whispered. "I know," I said. Which meant one thing. My wife had at least two different people involved in whatever the hell this situation was. The guy from the messages. And apparently Daniel's girlfriend too. The realization hit both of us at the same time. "Are they all meeting each other?" Daniel muttered. I didn't answer because honestly, I had no clue anymore. But the next thing that happened made the situation even stranger. The guy leaned in and kissed my wife. Not a quick peck. A real kiss. Right there in the parking lot. Something inside me snapped. Before I even realized what I was doing, I had already started walking toward them. "Mark," Daniel said behind me, but I barely heard him. My heart was pounding so loudly it drowned everything else out. About halfway across the lot, my wife finally noticed me. Her face went from relaxed to confused to pure shock in about 2 seconds. "Mark?" she blurted out. The guy next to her turned and looked at me like he was trying to figure out who I was. I stopped a few feet away. For a moment nobody said anything. Then my wife did the most predictable thing imaginable. She lied. "Oh my God!" she said quickly, looking between me and the guy. "This isn't what it looks like." I actually laughed. Because at that moment, with everything I'd seen and everything I already knew, that sentence felt almost insulting. "What does it look like then?" I asked. She opened her mouth, clearly scrambling for some kind of explanation. The guy next to her looked completely confused now. "Lisa, who is this?" he asked. My wife hesitated. Just for a second. Then she said something that made the entire situation explode into chaos. "This is my brother." When my wife said, "This is my brother," there was about a 2-second silence where nobody moved. Then I started laughing. Not a normal laugh. The kind that comes out when your brain just can't process how ridiculous a situation is. "My brother," I repeated. The guy looked confused as hell. He glanced at me, then at her. "Wait. I thought you said you were an only child." She froze. Just for a fraction of a second, but I saw it. That tiny moment where the lie didn't line up fast enough. "Half-brother," she said quickly, waving her hand like it was obvious. "From my dad's side." That was complete nonsense. I'd known her family for nearly a decade. She didn't have a half-brother. The guy's expression shifted from confusion to suspicion. "Lisa, what's going on?" he asked slowly. I looked directly at him. "My name's Mark," I said. "I'm her husband." You could literally see the color drain out of his face. "Your what?" "Husband." My wife immediately jumped in. "Okay, stop," she snapped, suddenly irritated. "Mark, you're being dramatic." That word hit me like a slap. Dramatic. I gestured toward the hotel behind us. "You're coming out of a hotel with another guy and I'm being dramatic?" She crossed her arms. "It's not like that." "Then what is it like?" She opened her mouth, then closed it again. For once, the lies weren't coming fast enough. Meanwhile, the guy was staring at her like his entire reality had just shattered. "You told me you were divorced," he said quietly. She immediately turned toward him. "I am separated," she insisted. "We literally live together," I said flatly. That's when Daniel finally walked up behind me. He looked at the guy, then at my wife. "Where's Jessica?" he asked. My wife's head snapped toward him. "Who?" she said. Daniel pulled out his phone and showed a photo of his girlfriend. "Her." My wife's expression changed again, another flicker of panic. And suddenly everything started making more sense. Because the guy next to her spoke up. "Wait," he said slowly. "You said the friend you meet here sometimes was named Jess." Daniel's jaw clenched. "Oh, she's definitely here," he muttered. Now all four of us were standing in a hotel parking lot realizing something bigger was happening. Which meant my wife hadn't just been lying to me. She'd been lying to everyone. And just when the situation felt like it couldn't get more chaotic, the hotel doors opened again, and a woman walked out. Daniel immediately whispered one word. Jessica. When Jessica walked out of the hotel doors, my stomach dropped so hard it felt like it had hit the floor. She was laughing, holding a coffee in one hand, looking completely carefree, like she had no idea the chaos she was stepping into. And then she saw us. Her eyes went wide. "Oh my God!" she said, freezing mid-step. At that moment, I realized something horrible. My wife had somehow managed to juggle 3 people at the same time: me, this random guy in the parking lot, and Daniel's girlfriend, Jessica, and apparently all of them had no idea about each other, until now. My wife's expression went from shock to panic in a heartbeat. "Mark, I can explain," she said, her voice sharp but trembling. I just stared. I couldn't even speak. The betrayal, the sheer audacity, the casual lies, everything slammed into me at once. Daniel was standing behind me, jaw tight. "She's your girlfriend?" he asked Jessica. Jessica shook her head. I'm her friend," she stammered, clearly trying to buy herself time. "I didn't know she was married." "Ha! Yeah, right," my wife interrupted. "Jessica, stop it. Don't make this worse." The guy next to her, the first guy, just shook his head slowly. "Wait, so we're all involved?" "Yes," my wife snapped. "It's not what you think." That's when I realized that for her, lying had become reflex. Not an occasional thing. Not small lies. Everything she said was filtered through a maze of deception. I felt rage, confusion, disbelief, heartbreak, all at once. My hands were shaking. My chest felt tight. And then, suddenly, I noticed something else. No one was leaving. Everyone was staring at my wife, and the sheer panic on her face told me she had no plan for this. Which, in some weird, twisted way, made me feel powerful. For the first time in weeks, I wasn't the one being manipulated. I was seeing the consequences of her choices unfold in real time. I opened my mouth to speak, but the words wouldn't come. Because honestly, nothing I could say would undo what I had just discovered. And then she tried to make the next move, a move that would probably haunt me forever. She stepped forward, hands raised like she was trying to calm everyone down. "Look," she said, her voice suddenly soft, almost pleading. "This is complicated. I didn't mean for it to happen this way. I needed space, okay?" I froze. Space? After everything I'd seen, after all the lies, after finding messages, after this insane hotel scene, space? That was her excuse? The first guy scoffed. "Space? You're literally cheating on everyone here." Jessica looked furious. "You lied to me." Daniel's voice was icy. "She lied to all of us." And yet, she kept talking. Fast, sharp, defensive. A whirlwind of excuses. Work stress, feeling ignored, emotional confusion, whatever nonsense she could throw out to make herself look less guilty. I realized something in that moment: she was good at this. Too good. Lies came faster than truths, and somehow, she expected everyone to just accept them. I felt my anger peak. My voice, which had been stuck in my chest, finally came out. "Lisa. Enough." She blinked. "Mark. No!" I snapped, the words trembling but cutting sharp. "I've seen everything. I know everything. Stop lying." Her mouth opened again, then closed. For a few seconds there was complete silence. Then the first guy, the one I'd seen her kiss, finally spoke. "So, what do we do now?" Jessica shook her head. "I don't even know who I'm mad at first." Daniel muttered, I need to go." And I realized something terrifying: even with all this chaos, my wife wasn't broken by the confrontation. She was still trying to control the narrative, still trying to minimize her guilt. I felt the betrayal sink deeper than ever. Everything I thought I knew about us, about trust, about love, gone. My legs felt weak, my heart felt heavy, and for the first time in my life, I felt completely powerless. It wasn't just about her cheating. It was about the total collapse of reality I'd trusted. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. I need to think, I said. My voice was low, but steady. And in that moment, I realized I had a decision to make, one that could change my life forever. After that chaotic scene in the parking lot, I left. I didn't scream. I didn't fight. I just walked to my car, got in, and drove. I didn't know where I was going. I didn't care. I just needed to escape the surreal nightmare that had become my life. The drive was silent except for the hum of the engine. My mind kept replaying every lie, every text, every sneaky late-night excuse. The betrayal wasn't just emotional, it was personal, invasive, like someone had broken into the very foundation of my life. By the time I got back home, my hands were still shaking. I sat on the couch, the apartment feeling emptier than ever. Everything looked the same, but I knew it would never feel the same again. I kept thinking about how quickly things had escalated. From small little fibs. I stayed late at work, I went to the gym, to full-blown multi-person affairs, lies to everyone, hotel rendezvous, and now a public confrontation in the parking lot. It was like living through a movie, only it was real, and the pain was mine. And the worst part? The realization that this wasn't a one-off. This had been going on for months. Maybe years. I felt a mix of anger and shame for not seeing the signs sooner, even though deep down I'd felt something was off. I sat there, scrolling through my own phone, rereading Daniel's messages. He had been as shocked as I was, but at least he had chosen to act instead of pretending everything was fine. I realized that if I didn't decide what to do now, I might just spiral into endless paranoia, replaying her lies over and over. The anger slowly gave way to another emotion, sadness. Pure, aching sadness. Not just for myself, but for the life I thought I had. For the trust I'd given freely, thinking it was mutual. For the person I loved and now barely recognized. After hours of sitting there, I made a decision. Not out of anger, not out of revenge, but out of clarity. I couldn't continue like this. I couldn't share a life with someone who had built an entirely separate world behind my back. I needed to confront her one last time, set boundaries, and then decide on the future. It was going to be brutal, but I finally felt ready to face the truth head-on, not through texts, lies, or hotel encounters, but directly, for the final time. That evening, I told her we needed to talk. She came home late, as usual, looking tired but alert, the same mask she always wore. I didn't bother with pleasantries. "Sit down," I said, my voice calm but firm. She hesitated, then plopped onto the couch. "Mark, what's going on?" I didn't even look at her. I just laid out everything. The messages, the hotel, Daniel, Jessica, the lies. Every detail I had confirmed. I watched her face shift through shock, panic, and then that familiar, practiced annoyance. "It's not what it looks like," she started, cutting off my recounting. "Stop," I said. "I've heard that line 1,000 times in my head over the past few weeks. I know exactly what it looks like. And I know who you are. The lies, the deception, everything." She leaned back, crossing her arms. "I didn't mean to hurt you. I just needed space, okay? I never thought it would get this messy." "Space?" I repeated, my voice trembling. "You call cheating on multiple people, lying to everyone, and sneaking around space?" Her lips pressed into a thin line. I didn't know how to stop. And that's when it hit me, the raw truth of her personality. She wasn't remorseful because of empathy or guilt. She was calculating, sharp, quick to lie, quick to blame, and somehow convince herself she could manage this chaos indefinitely. I felt a wave of grief wash over me. Not just anger. Not just betrayal. But profound sadness for the person I thought I knew, for the years of trust one had invested, and for the life I thought we were building together. "Mark, please," she whispered. "Can we work through this?" I shook my head slowly. "No. Not like this. Not after everything. I can't trust you. I can't live like this. I need to leave. I need to rebuild my life without being manipulated or lied to every day." Her eyes widened. She tried to argue, to guilt me, to charm me, but I had nothing left to give. The shock had faded, only clarity remained. I had finally reclaimed my own power in this mess, and it felt like both liberation and heartbreak at the same time. I told her I'd start the separation process, keep things civil where necessary, but I wasn't sticking around. Not for apologies, not for excuses, not for whatever version of reality she thought she could spin. For the first time in months, I felt a strange kind of peace. Painful, but necessary. It's been a few weeks since I made that decision. My wife moved out, I changed the locks, and I've been slowly picking up the pieces of my life. Some days are worse than others. I still catch myself replaying moments, wondering what I missed, feeling the sting of betrayal. But other days I feel relief. Relief that I no longer have to tiptoe around lies, relief that I don't have to live in constant suspicion, relief that I can start rebuilding trust in myself. What this experience taught me is brutal but invaluable. First, trust is fragile. Once it's broken, you can't just patch it with apologies. You have to protect yourself. Second, the signs are usually there. The little inconsistencies, the excuses, the sudden changes, and your gut often knows the truth before your brain fully admits it. Third, people can be astonishingly selfish and manipulative, even those you love the most. For anyone going through something similar, pay attention to your instincts. Don't make excuses for someone else's lies. And don't feel guilty for stepping away from a toxic situation, no matter how long you've invested. Walking away isn't failure, it's survival. I won't lie, I'm heartbroken. But I'm also learning that heartbreak isn't the end. It's a chance to understand what you deserve, what boundaries matter, and who you truly are when someone else's betrayal forces you to face reality. In the end, I don't hate her, I just don't recognize her anymore. And I'm finally letting myself start over, piece by piece, knowing that the next chapter is mine to write.